So these 10 items here aren't in any particular order, and I'll go ahead and just get started with the first one here. The first one is the Fang. The Fang is just an incredible piece of equipment here. And of course, over the course of time, it's had a lot of history, you could say, in terms of nerfs and everything like that, and controversy, you could say. But the Fang really does just still turn out to be an incredible weapon, especially when you get into bossing for Slayer. Now, it can be a generally really good weapon in any fight that you're finding yourself in with a monster. But of course, there are some times when perhaps the whip would do better, or other weapons, depending on the actual bonuses of the monster that you're fighting. And so I definitely recommend taking a look at a DPS calc in order to actually tell what's going to be best. But if you're talking about just a general overall really fantastic weapon, especially for its price of like 11.5 mil right now, I want to say. Let me check here. Yep, 11.5 mil just about. It's just such a good weapon when you consider all those things. So I would definitely think about investing in a Fang if you haven't yet, especially for the type of bossing that you can get into with Slayer. I mean, it's fantastic at Cerberus, it's fantastic at Abyssal Sire, Bandos, things like that. It can just do really well at. Obviously not the best in a lot of situations, but really a very close second in many. So very highly consider the Osmumten's Fang, I would say, for sure. Next up, I've got here the Sunfire Fanatic Helm. Now, I have this kind of as a stand-in also for like a Proselyte Helm, for example. Just anything that really is going to give you a good prayer bonus. You can see here that this thing gives you a prayer bonus. If we look at it right here, from +4, if we put this on, up to +10, so it's a +6 prayer bonus. It's just a really good way of conserving your prayer as you're going about Slayer. This will be something that I talk about a few times during this video, but conserving your prayer is a really solid way to save a lot of money over the course of going from 1 to 99 Slayer. Now, of course, if you have all the money in the world, go ahead and just use Piety the whole time and use your best DPS. But if you don't, and you're looking to actually find a good balance between DPS and saving money, then I would definitely recommend getting something like a Sunfire Fanatic Helm, which I think has a few 100k, or something like a Proselyte Helm. Definitely a good way to go about it in order to find that good balance there. But either one, I put the Sunfire Fanatic Helm here because that's what I've got and what I use personally. But yeah, saving yourself some money over the course of time is a great way to go about doing it by preserving prayer. Next, in the same vein of things, I've got the Holy Wrench. If you're using prayer potions or super restores, having a Holy Wrench in your inventory is going to save you a lot of time, or sorry, not a lot of time, but a lot of money, right, over the course of drinking all those potions. So it's definitely something to consider if you're using things like Piety or Protect from Melee over the course of your Slayer training. It's something that I personally didn't use as much as I wish I had over the course of getting 99 Slayer, but it really is just a solid guy there to save you a lot of money as you go about going from 1 to 99 Slayer if you're using those prayers. Next up, I've got the Blowpipe here. I've got the Blazing Blowpipe, as you can see. You don't need the transmog on it, but the Blowpipe is a really fantastic weapon for a lot of those really smaller tasks, especially if you're Turiel skipping. There's a lot of monsters that you can kill very quickly, like cows and goblins and bats and things like that when you're Turiel skipping, or just when you're doing various Slayer tasks that the Blowpipe can do incredibly at. Now, it's not as strong as it used to be. It's gone through a nerf as well, or a lot of nerfs, similar to the Osmumten's Fang, but it still proves to be an incredible weapon, and one that I would definitely recommend you have if you're looking to do a lot of Slayer. Next up, we've got the Ring of the Gods, and this guy has a +8 prayer bonus when you've imbued it, and that is just incredible in one single slot there, especially for a ring. And so the Ring of the Gods is a great choice if you're doing that whole prayer conservation thing that I've talked about earlier. Again, you notice that I talk a lot about prayer during this series, or during this video. It's because I did it myself a lot. I used a lot of Protect from Melee, Protect from Magic, whatever it is that you're doing, and I used a lot of it as I was going from 1 to 99. So having a really solid way to conserve that prayer is really important, and that's why I think the Ring of the Gods is a fantastic choice and an awesome investment for if you're looking to do a lot of praying while you're doing Slayer. Next, we've got the Bonecrusher, and the Bonecrusher is just a great way to get prayer experience over time, right? The Bonecrusher is going to help you by burying bones, or crushing bones, I guess, as you do your Slayer tasks, and especially in the Catacombs of Karend, that can be an incredible place to use the Bonecrusher, because not only will you get the prayer experience from the actual bones being crushed, but you'll also get the prayer restoration that happens in the Catacombs of Karend for every bone that you bury. And so since a lot of Slayer can happen in the Catacombs of Karend, I'd highly recommend having a Bonecrusher in your inventory at all times so that you can capitalize on all of those different bonuses and perks that it gives you. Next up, we've got a Slayer Helm, which is a pretty obvious thing, but it's something that I had to put in here just because of how important it is, especially getting it imbued. food. I see a lot more people than I would expect not using an imbued Slayer helm, and if you don't have the imbued version, anytime you're using melee, or sorry, anytime you're not using melee, it's not going to give you those bonuses. You want those bonuses, that increased accuracy and damage for melee, ranged, and magic, whatever it is that you're doing. And so having the imbued Slayer helm is a really, really important thing to have as you're going about doing Slayer. Obviously, it's going to be best in slot for pretty much any task that you can use it at when you don't have to have another type of helmet on. And so it is a fantastic choice. Not always used at every boss, but for most bosses that you're going to be doing with Slayer, you're definitely going to want to use it. So for Vorkath, you don't use it, for example, when you're on a Blue Dragon's task or a Vorkath task, but it is used at, for example, Sire and Cerberus and other places like that. So definitely get yourself an imbued Slayer helm while you're doing Slayer. Next up, I've got here Karambwans, and the reason I put Karambwans here is because they are just so great of a food source for both irons and main players. They're really solid in the sense that they're very cheap if you're buying them and very quick to accumulate if you're getting them yourself as an Iron Man. I feel like they're often overlooked as an awesome food source, and maybe Iron Men would know that a little bit better, that they can be used for an awesome food source, but I personally think that more people should use them because they're only like 500 GP. I want to say, let me check here. Yeah, they are 533 GP at the time of this video, but they heal 18 health. Like, that's insane, you know? And obviously, if you're combining that with a normal food, a normal piece of food like a shark or something like that, then you've got the tick eating that you can do. But even if you just use them by themselves as a food source, it can be an incredible way to save money and still get a lot of healing in as you're eating. Next up, what I've got here, second to last, is the Slayer ring, and I've got an Eternal version here. You don't have to use the Eternal version, but the Slayer ring obviously is a great way to get around. A lot of your Slayer tasks that you're going to do that aren't in the Catacombs of Kourend are going to be done at the various places you can teleport to with the Slayer ring. If you can get the Eternal version, great. If not, no worries. Either way, it's going to be able to take you to the Stronghold Slayer Cave, the Mauritania Slayer Tower, and the Fremnik Slayer Dungeon, which are three incredible places to do Slayer tasks at. You're finding yourself doing a lot of tasks in those three places. You can also go to Tarn's Lair and Dark Beasts if you're killing things in either of those places, but for the most part, you're going to be using the top three options, which are really, really solid places that you'll need to go to as you're doing Slayer. And then very last, what I've got here is a simple super strength potion. I feel like it's really important to make sure that you're maxing out your DPS in cost-effective ways. And honestly, when I do Slayer, I'm not smart with my money, not as smart as I should be anyway, and I use super combats. A lot of the time, divine super combats would just eat away at your money. And so having something like a super strength, and I didn't put this here because I only wanted 10 items, but a super attack alongside a super strength, not combining them into a super combat potion, is a great way to save money and honestly get yourself still incredible DPS, especially if you're protecting from melee with the various prayer saving items that we've talked about here. Having the super strength and a super attack and not needing a super defense is going to be a great way to get yourself that extra DPS without sacrificing as much money as you might otherwise if you were using a super combat or a divine super combat. And so I put this here for that reason, specifically to talk about why the super strength itself is really good, but also kind of to highlight that idea that we've been talking about, kind of reinforce it, about how saving money while not sacrificing too much of your DPS and other things like that are really important and possible. So that's another thing that I definitely consider there, is the super strength. Having a solid amount of those and super attacks is going to be a great way to help you out with your Slayer training. But anyway, folks, good luck slaying. Just know that I love you, and see ya.